Welcome to Regulatory Ramblings. Our guest today is Angelina Kwan. In her time, she's done it all just about. She's been a lawyer, compliance person, a regulator, and now an entrepreneur. She's done stints at the local Securities and Futures Commission, as well as the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, as well as the cryptocurrency exchange. And she joins us today to talk about Hong Kong's prospects as a virtual asset and fintech hub, as well as the transition between Web 2.0 and 3.0 and why it should matter to young people. Angelina, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, AJ. Great to see you.
Recently, Paul Chan, our financial secretary, said that pretty soon, before month's end, that the government's policy statement would be announced and it would make its positions clear on virtual asset trade in terms of its vision, strategies, perceived regulatory apparatus for opening up opportunities. Could we expect something along the lines of Vara, the Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority in the UAE, the world's first crypto regulator, or is that would that still be too premature?
Why don't I back into that answer, if that's okay?
Yeah.
So, as you are aware, Hong Kong is a self-administrative region, and Hong Kong and Macau have been given, one could call them gifts, one could be called rights, or whatever it is. Macau has been given gambling, and Hong Kong has been given financial services markets, as well as horse racing. So I think all along the financial services community, as well as the digital asset community, has prospered in Hong Kong. But there were some wobbles. I think there is a realization, and I can't speak for Paul, but I think all of us in the digital asset industry and financial services industry would like to see virtual assets succeed as a real asset class. And bearing in mind with what I just said, Hong Kong has an ability to be able to do that. And I think now a lot of us have been working in the background with Financial Services Development Council. We've been working very closely with the SFC, and the SFC has done a lot of work on this whole area. So Mr. Chan, the financial secretary, has said that he's going to unveil this at FinTech Week. But we also already see the building blocks in place. First, we've got AMLO, the anti-money laundering reporting ordinance going through LegCo right now. So that's expected to pass, and in fact is in its final stages of passing. They had their last meeting October 14th. So that will provide a framework for licensing. If you remember, because you were in compliance before as well as reporting, we didn't have that framework in place. You couldn't hang digital assets on the Securities and Futures Ordinance. So that's why they had to make this special regime, which is what he's going to probably be announcing. The second thing is a couple of birds have told me that they will be consulting on retail. Now, that is a really big change, which we're very excited about. Because originally,
Protection is huge.
Yes, investor protection is huge, but you and I both know that we can click on any exchange that's outside of Hong Kong, and even if you're retail, or you can just go down the street and buy Bitcoin if you're retail right now. So I think that is a good thing that the government is recognizing this and going to have a consultation process on this. And as long as we put the good guardrails there, it will protect investors, which is something that's really quite good in terms of acceptance of where are we going with digital assets. So I think all of that will be announced, and I think there will be a embracing of digital assets, which is something that, as I outlined, we have the right to do this as long as we put in a good regulatory regime that doesn't have, as we used to say, investors on the train tracks losing money. And we have guardrails there to protect investors. That is something that was within our remit as an international financial center to be able to do. And I think with Mr. Financial Secretary announcing this, it will be quite exciting. So within the SFC, we have a unit called the FinTech unit, and it's headed by Elizabeth Wong, and she reports to Julia Leung. Now, you asked about Vara. Dubai is very lucky because they came into this game very late. So they could see what all the other regulators did in terms of IOSCO, and they could actually take the best parts of that and create a new body.
And it's starter advantage.
Yes, exactly. So Vara is, I have been going through their websites and things like that. It's very exciting what they've done. And they've also got really, really highly competent regulators from some of the best regulators around the world. And they are doing cutting edge work, and they're licensing fund managers, exchanges, as well as DeFi. So it's very, very exciting to see how they're doing that. Just a fun fact, I went through what are their fines if there's an infraction. So for each infraction, if they do an enforcement action, which I haven't seen one yet, they will fine whoever it is 500,000 Emirati dollars. So that's 1.68400 Hong Kong dollars. Yeah, exactly. So they have the fining power. Now, just one fine itself is not a lot of money, but if you start stacking it up, that could be quite interesting in terms of fines that Vara could put in place. But they have seen the best, and I think they've built something pretty interesting. So, but you can't compare Hong Kong to Vara because Hong Kong, the SFC came about in the 90s, in the 80s, 90s, and basically we have grown with the market. We've got over 3,000 licensed companies in Hong Kong. 24,000 licensed persons. We've got 602 brokers and or people that trade on the exchange. We've got fund managers, professional investors. We've got family offices in Hong Kong. It's a very different market. So Vara has the, I won't say luck, but has the good fortune of having a clean slate, of bringing in virtual assets and being focused to that. And for those markets like the SEC, US SEC, or like Hong Kong, we need to craft a regulatory regime. And unfortunately, in Hong Kong, this SFO didn't have that regulatory regime in place. It doesn't fit what a security is, which is why the new AMLO is coming in place. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think Vara has Vara's benefits. I wish we could have done that for Hong Kong.
But they're a virgin market, so as you said, there's a clean slate, and they can really zero in on that niche. Whereas
Hong Kong,
different parts of the financial system. When you're a student, you study things in isolation. That's deliberate. You study banking, securities, futures, insurance. You don't study the interconnectedness between those different fields and how they affect each other. And so clearly crypto would have ripple effects in banking and finance.
Exactly. Well, they haven't. Largely, this crypto winter, thankfully, has not affected the larger banking and securities.
Given the weight of time.
Yes. And that's why for Hong Kong, it's very important that the regulatory regime be in place to implement proper controls. And that's what the SFC is doing. So we meaning a group of volunteers and myself, working with the Securities Institute, are putting together training modules, examination modules for this new AMLO regime that's coming in place. So finally, I think the digital asset industry has to embrace that in order to be recognized as a real asset, you need to be properly regulated. You need to understand internal controls. You can't just walk off with people's money or Bitcoin and overextend or overtrade or not diversify. And I think that's going to be the watershed moment for digital assets. And I think what Hong Kong is going to offer is consistency, predictability, clarity, and rules in place that people can follow. So the SFC is working on this, and that's what I need to use to come up with the examinations as well as training materials for our Securities Institute. And from there, we can grow out this industry. And I think we've been a little bit slow. We've had some problems, but it's now on track. And I'm so excited that Paul, or our financial secretary, Mr. Chan, is actually doing this because we have a road.
It is still a work in progress, and we're learning as we're going on. But the investor protection angle really concerns a lot of people.
Yep.
Because people still haven't forgotten about 2008, the Lehman mini-bond saga. And so the question is, one bright line rule, which people in the industry would like to see fixed, is do you adopt the same rule as the US where it's limited to professional investors that are high net worth with liquid assets of $1 million US or more? Or, I mean, do you open it up to the retail sector? But the retail sector has gotten burned, and Lehman taught us that there's a difference between being high net worth and being financially sophisticated.
But the issue with, or not an issue, but the difference between what happened with the Lehman issue and what is now digital assets are very different products. Right now, anyone in Hong Kong can go to an OTC dealer, and there are many that have opened up in Hong Kong because there was a lacunae or a hole in the legislation. So you can go and buy 1 Bitcoin or 1 Ethereum or 10 Ethereum. You can also buy it through exchanges that are offshore. So that recognition is already there in terms of if people were interested, they can do this. What needs to happen is there needs to be more investor education. So common Mrs. Chan on the street will say, I don't understand. What is Bitcoin? I think this is so weird. It's nothing. So a lot of people don't understand it. And that's one of the reasons why retail has not entirely moved into digital assets. And I think that education process is going to be very important. So you're going to see those players that when Mr. Chan announces this at FinTech Week, you're going to see a whole series of a regulatory regime, an educational process. I mean, I've spent so much time in terms of doing podcasts, of educating people. If you don't understand it, please do not buy it. And it's the same, I would say the same thing for equities. I'd say it's the same thing for futures. If you don't understand it, don't buy it. Because you're getting 3.5% right now on a certificate of deposit with almost no risk for any bank. So just put your money there for now. But if you're interested in learning about futures, options, or virtual assets, then spend the time and be a proper investor, learn what the products are, and then go into them. And I think that's the thing where the SFC, as well as market participants, are really going to start advocating for. And you're going to see more and more training. You're going to see more and more people discussing these things, more and more training courses about this once this is actually announced. Because it's not just virtual assets, it's fintech. The financial secretary announced that we will be a fintech, virtual asset, financial services hub. We will be the hub of the future, an international financial center. And that's why they've established this new organization that will help attract and seed new companies coming in, new fintech companies coming into Hong Kong. They will be changing some of the requirements for visas to bring in highly skilled workers in terms of coding, financial services, and so that whole regime is going to change, which is quite exciting. It's something that Financial Services and Development Council have really been advocating with the government to do this. So
it's exciting, but then you think about, so you're doing what Singapore and Dubai did 3 years ago, 5 years ago. I mean, it comes to the point about is the value proposition still there for Hong Kong and crypto and digital assets and more broadly fintech? Because just 2 years, if we're having this discussion 2 years ago,
It would have been perfect.
right, Singapore was in pole position, but Singapore stalled.
Yep.
A lot of startups have been given provisional status. Nothing's moving forward.
Nothing's moving. Yeah.
Approved. And Hong Kong's figuring out what it wants to do. But again, more established jurisdictions need to take a more deliberative approach. And yet everyone's talking about Dubai. So has Hong Kong been left in the dust, or is it, no, we're taking the slow and steady approach, and when it's right, we'll enter the fray?
As I said, I would love to come with you to Dubai. I really want to see it. I just get to fly in and out. But
there's a lot of money flowing into that sector.
Correct.
Like, okay, they're taking it seriously.
Yep.
This arena has got its gatekeeper, its rule maker, its enforcer. We feel comfortable entering into it.
Right. But there's also something called family life. And I don't know about you, but I think we discussed this before this. You love this place. You love Hong Kong just as much as I do. And when after work, when I take that hike up in the mountains, or when I go wake surfing in the morning in Hong Kong, or just take a walk down Mongkok to see the markets.
Like the sunsets in the western part of the island, there's nothing like that.
And I have to tell you, a lot, the lifestyle in Hong Kong is something that's very important. And many of the expat friends of mine have left, really miss it here. And if the right regimes and right attraction were in place, they would come back in what I would say a New York second, but a Hong Kong second.
Oh,
So,
completely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so many people there live the expat triangle of home, work, mall or club, and back home again.
yeah, exactly.
And many of them, it is, I mean, the places, the UA in general, they follow the US model. It's built for cars. Walkability and getting around is it's just not there, and you wouldn't want to do it. It's so swelteringly hot. Hong Kong does offer that, but I don't know. It seems like people go where the money goes. People go where the offers are.
Well, we got the money. We have the money here. We have the professional investors. We've got family offices. We've got more family offices than most places. So you're seeing family offices put branches in different places. But actually, people will invest and live where they want to live. So I think that's something that if we can capitalize this right now and get this right. This happened, the same thing happened about 15 years ago, where Singapore attracted many, many hedge funds. And everybody was like, oh, all the hedge funds are going to Singapore.
Only because they were more lax. And then the position of the SFC was, okay, you're saying Singapore's asking less of you? Okay, go to Singapore.
Go to Singapore. But you know what? They all came back. And that's why I've been using this little phrase, believe in Hong Kong. And I mean, I believe in Hong Kong. And I think that if we get it right this time, so government has put in $30 billion to build this new capital attraction / investment firm. They're putting in this licensing regime. The only thing that we can do is to help and try to sell Hong Kong to our friends and colleagues who have left, who want to come back, and bring them back to Hong Kong. And that's what I'm hoping that the announcements at FinTech Week will actually attract a lot of people back. I think what you're going to see is people are going to have a Dubai office, a Singapore office, but definitely be living in Hong Kong, and they'll be flying between the three places now that flights are coming back. I think the only last thing to do is a final relaxation of all the quarantine will bring us in place. But that'll be. So that'll be the last and final, but it's getting there.
Yeah, steadily it's getting there. I mean, that comes to, young people and Many of them have gotten disillusioned in recent years,
Very much.
multiple reasons. The attitude amongst many of them seems to be stamp my ticket so that I can move on. And what would what would developments in this space mean for young people, graduates of law schools and business schools in this town? Should it encourage them to stay? Should it encourage them to be hopeful about the future? Is it an indication or invitation to them that they need, studying conventional subjects is no longer enough? They need to upskill. They need to add to their repertoire of skills. They need to learn about fintech and crypto and what have you. I mean, what's the message?
I think, AJ, what you've just said, the final statement is applicable to every young person now. Your final statement was all young people, college grads, people in college, should be naturally inquisitive and understand that this whole world is revolving and moving faster and faster and faster. And therefore, you must understand technology. And whatever your given business or profession that you want to go into, technology is going to touch everything you do, every single thing now. Yesterday, I sat in a restaurant. It took us 10, 15 minutes to put in the order through our smartphone because it's completely no waitresses or waiters. You have to put the order completely through your phone. For example,
restaurant?
No, it's a coffee shop. It was a very nice tasting coffee shop, but it took us 10 minutes because we couldn't figure it out. It was difficult to enter, but once we got the hang of it. But it's just an example because technology is going to start pervading every single part of our life. And I know you asked me to talk about Web3, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But Web3 is already starting to revolutionize our lives and will continue to revolutionize our life. So I don't care if you're sitting in Los Angeles and you're just about to graduate from Marshall High School, or you're sitting in Hong Kong and you're just about to graduate from Maryknoll Convent School. Whatever it is, if you're not doing coding, if you don't understand how gamers work, or what gaming is, if you don't understand about what are apps that are being built now, then you really need to get cracking on that. And as a summer project, kids, you should actually start getting into either coding school or understanding how the taxonomy and how tech works. And then as you go into college or as you matriculate into an industrial school, it could be, or it could be into a full-time university and you're going into law, those areas are going to be so important. And more, I'm hearing about kids and adults starting to code in Python. It's become a normal language like French and English. So it's not just for Hong Kong students, it's for everyone that you need to be out there. And I always say that the hottest subject right now is data science. If you can interpret the data and if you can extrapolate the data from systems and interpret it to help companies, you've got it made anywhere you go. You can do it in India, you can do it in London, you can do it in the United States, and certainly you can do it in Hong Kong.
You were telling me about how coding is gaining popularity. And I think all kids should be learning some degree of coding. But I mean, it strikes me that the key question of the 21st century in terms of the prospects of labor are how well does your labor complement or augment the results produced by technology? And if it does, you have a future. If not, you could very well face redundancy. I mean, we're seeing this in compliance, where it does look as though certain junior money laundering reporting officers, I mean, I know most about AML, certain junior money laundering reporting officers and certain mid-management positions are going to be made redundant. And to your point about data science, increasingly one gets the impression that pretty soon financial crime compliance teams are going to be headed by data scientists, and that knowledge of that is going to matter more than necessarily knowledge of substantive financial crime.
I think
That it's
you're
going to be
right.
more process-oriented than substantive.
But nevertheless, the understanding of financial crime, plus coupled with an understanding of the data, is going to be very important. So what you're seeing right now with a lot of the crypto exchanges is you've seen a lot of tech people moving into the crypto world, and then you get this crypto bro culture, and you get many of the issues that have now surfaced with this whole crypto winter. So you've had lack of diversification, lack of internal controls, people running off with funds, and bankruptcies after bankruptcies for Celsius, for Terra. So these were people with tech backgrounds, but they didn't have the internal controls, the ethical, and the background of being in financial services.
Because a lot of people in Silicon Valley live as though without any rules.
Yes, and that's what happened. And what you're seeing around the world is a embracing now, finally, in terms of regimes coming in place of rules and responsibilities to be held, and the senior management being held accountable. You're also seeing a lot of changes in some of those digital asset firms in terms of people stepping down and new people with traditional financial services backgrounds, 15 years at JP Morgan, 20 years in blah, blah, blah company, moving in. Well, it's going to take time, and one person can't do everything. So, but you're seeing that. So I don't think that AML person that has that experience is going to be extinct, but I think that AML/compliance person needs to retool for the future, just as I think kids and all of us need to keep retooling and keep learning for the future to understand these technological advances. And it's not just crypto, it's fintech. It's, I was looking at some of the market making systems now. I mean, although it's the same type of product, they're more and more advanced, they're faster and faster and faster. And this is traditional finance that are taking opportunities in terms of changes within equities and making sure that they make prices out there. So traditional finance is not going to go extinct, but it does need to change. And you know what? Every year there are changes in financial services. If you don't keep up, you're going to be obsolete. And that's something that's very important for people to remember.
My issue with a lot of the fintech programs, and by the way, I should plug HKU's FinTech certificate.
I should take that then.
It is 3 modules, well worth it.
Cool.
And it's designed for non-techies. But my issue with many of the fintech programs out there is they're assuming prior knowledge.
Yes,
Because when you
that's the problem.
When you dig into the curriculum, it's assuming you have some degree of knowledge of computer science. They're aiming for techies, and that's not most people. Even if it's from a prestigious institution, I mean, you've got to, for it to be successful, you've got to assume no prior knowledge. But then it's a question. Then it becomes a question of how much do you quote unquote dumb down the program to make it mass market.
That's why, as you are aware, I think I told you, I'm the vice chair of the Women's Foundation. Yeah. So one of the things that we have been doing is focusing on Band 3 schools. So we put together a program called Girls Go Tech, which a number of financial services companies have been helping us with it locally. So we go to Band 3 schools and we train the teachers to be able to train their students. And we work with their students to think laterally, to think about tech and moving into tech as a industry. We get them computers, and during the dark days of COVID, I mean, I sat there cleaning computers and that were donated to us so that we could give young women and girls computers because they may not have had the funds to be able to go buy a computer, but their classes all moved to Zoom, like overnight. So with these programs that are coming in place, there's a recognition that if you allow and if you give them the opportunity, they will embrace this. And this Girls Go Tech program, the final project is they work together as groups and they do a presentation and they compete. And some of the apps and some of the designs that they have come up with, and the competition is, the results are available on our website, which is twf.org. And you can see these girls who didn't have this background, they're band 3 schools, that they come up with these really great apps. And not only do they learn how to think in tech, but they actually learn, they get excited about it, they have an opportunity to meet other people, and the presentation skills of what they learn of how to present what they came up together, which includes apps or programs or whatever it happens to be, just gives them self-confidence. And I think that has been probably one of our life-changing programs that we've done. And now one of the big investment banks in Hong Kong has now funded first-year college. They will pay for your first year of college. You can apply for this scholarship, and then of course you can apply for other scholarships later. If you study certain subjects like tech, and they'll get you into PolyU and so on and so forth. All the universities are offering these tech programs now. So it's trying to get more girls into STEM. And studies show that girls are socially distanced from staying in tech. Parents go, oh, young Jane, don't go into tech. It's too difficult. Stay in the humanities where you don't have to work so hard. And you have to work hard in the humanities too. Why don't you just let them stay in tech if they're interested in it? Or maths, or sciences, or engineering.
The only places that seem to have gotten it, I would say, are maybe the Scandinavian countries.
And India.
I was going to say Israel, but okay.
Israel and India. Yeah. Your schools in India are amazing in terms of the tech schools.
So during my recent trip to Dubai, and I attended many events, if not every second panel, every third panel was concerned about, or the primary discussion thread was about the transition from Web 2.0 to 3.0. The Metaverse was mentioned, applying the technology to realms other than financial services, to other areas of commerce and trade. Why should this interest us? Why should this concern us?
Because this is the future, and it's not going to happen. It is happening.
Because the attitude is, okay, the technology will evolve, and okay, fine. When the time comes, I'll use it. So why are we talking about this now? I mean, obviously, prognosticators, futurists, they're having a field day talking about such things. But the average person is like, how does this affect me? Why do I need to prepare in advance?
Why do you need to prepare is for two major reasons. Just like we've been talking about virtual assets and fintech, it's constantly changing and constantly evolving and constantly improving. So right now for Web 2, we've got you're running on a single chain. You're on one blockchain, and you've got your ETH jam-ups where your gas fees go sky high. In the world of Web 3.0, that is replaced because you can actually, through the use of oracles, not the company Oracle, but the use of oracles, which are standalone nodes, you can actually jump blockchains. And if this one is jammed up, it's like building 10 new freeways that make your whole systems faster. And if you can actually change your exchange or change your programs to be able to be Web 3, you can actually be more cost-effective, safer, decentralized, and be able to jump different blockchains to be even more efficient. And
so multiple pathways,
multiple opportunities.
Enabling what? Leading to what?
enabling faster, new programs, new functionality, having an infrastructure in place. So, actually, with virtual assets, when blockchain first came out, when Bitcoin first came out, that was the first chain. Then Vitalik Buterin came out with Ethereum. So there's been these chains, then you've seen Polkadot, Aave, and so on and so forth. But there hasn't been any change to the way that these chains are working. So now companies, and I spent a whole conference in New York learning about this and what are the possibilities. There are companies that are putting these train track rails to actually start linking these different blockchains together and making it more and more easy for users, developers to be able to be more inclusive, to be able to reach out further, to bring down costs. And that's some of the interesting thing that's coming out with Web3. And if you're not already studying and thinking about your architecture that needs to be changed for the future, and you're just stuck in one thing, then you're not going to be ready for the change in terms of the next jump, which is to Web3. So more decentralized, better ways of identification, hopefully more efficient programs. The Metaverse is going to be used more and more in terms of not just, oh, I want to watch an NFT walking around with your avatar, but you're going to see more and more functions with the Metaverse. And you sent me that interesting article. Yeah, the Metaverse has turned into a zoo, and I do believe that there should be Interpol there, because there's kiddie porn, there's all sorts of weirdos out there in terms of people, but there's also really good people out there. There's the retailers, there's the banks, and so on and so forth. And Web3 also allows for the next phase of these financial institutions that are in the Metaverse to be able to be located in the Metaverse, but also put their programming in there, their services in there. So I can only see the whole system opening up even more. Because right now it's very, okay, here's my chain, I can't move over, I need to actually program on a new chain, and so on and so forth. But wouldn't it be great that you can actually jump chains if you needed to? Because, oh, this chain is a bit jammed up, or the gas fees are way too high.
A variation of this conversation is something I've had with others, in that when we talk about distributed ledger technology, it'd be nice if there was one common ledger that all the banks were plugged into. And that you think about what could be done from a risk management standpoint.
Absolutely.
You've got too many dubious trades, you've got relative to the size of your assets, maybe you need to unwind some of those trades. We don't want another 2008. But the banks don't want that. They want their own closed circuit distributed ledger that only they can benefit from. And if there are cost savings, they will be passed on to shareholders and executives. And you're not going to see much in the way of cost savings if you're a customer. And so I think that notion of wider, community-wide, industry-wide transparency, which I think was what Satoshi was aiming for with his paper, you're not really seeing that, and it's making the predictions of some of the naysayers that in the early days of Bitcoin, you were the moderates that wanted to go more mainstream, but they understood that meant bringing mainstream banking and finance on board. You had the hardcore libertarian fringe that said, no, the bankers are crooks, don't let them anywhere near this, they'll corrupt it for their own ends. It's making the hardcore libertarian types sound almost prescient then, because when you see the banks using technology for their own ends, rather than, again, using it as a tool for transparency and risk minimization in the financial world.
And that's why Satoshi Nakamoto, who could have been men and women, we never know.
We'll never know.
But they, whoever they are, using the politically correct term of they, whoever they were, came up with a plan to have different systems together, working together, and not just one system that would collapse like it did during the Lehman financial crisis. And that was prescient at that time, and actually is still out there. And I think Web3 makes it even more simple to be able to do that. So what you're seeing is organizations having this flexibility, but yet having their own internal chain. But they may build other chains that do allow them to go out and connect with others. What will be interesting is the future of SWIFT. What will be the future of other of these giant financial services systems that are relied on by financial services companies. And it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to Web3. You're already seeing exchanges now, traditional financial exchanges, pivot towards connectivity, pivot towards new use cases and new opportunities. So I had the opportunity for FinTech Week to interview Yuval Ruz from Digital Asset. And I mean, some of the projects that he's working on in terms of working for governments, in terms of CBDC, as well as working for traditional companies, are fascinating in terms of the next steps of how do they build clearing systems, how do they connect, and you're seeing all the exchanges around the world start looking at going into digital assets or CBDC trading or even tokenization trading, which is why even the SFC now is issuing more guidance on tokenization and guidelines for that. So Web3 is the next step, and it opens a number of new opportunities. So it's not the be-all and end-all. And you know what? There's going to be a Web 4, and then a Web 5, and then there'll be a Web 8. You and I will be in this lifetime to see this, and it's constantly going to be improving that people are more and more connected.
I'm not sure the average person is that on a certain level, yes, they know technology is improving, but I don't know, I think people tend to expect that. Not that all progress is linear, but in the modern age, people, certainly post-World War II, people have come to expect that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're necessarily cognizant of these labels.
No, they won't see them.
Iterations,
Yeah.
these incarnations.
Most normal people won't even see the changes. But the people building the infrastructure will see it.
But from a user standpoint, people of a certain age are very technophobic. And my own view is things reach a tipping point when members of a certain age group, certain cohort, are no longer with us. Those of, say, my generation, perhaps a little older, start to become senior citizens. At that point, I would say it becomes a cascade effect. You reach a tipping point because then it'll probably be all online. And the banks will say, okay, fine. If you still want a paper statement, it's going to cost you more than $20 a month. Or either that or, no, we can't have this. If you're not tech savvy enough, assign your affairs to someone who is, because it's just not efficient for us. I definitely see things going in that direction. That all indications are you are being pushed not just by banks, but other entities to transact online.
More and more.
If you do so, we will reward you.
Yep. Exactly. No, you're right, AJ. Case in point with my coffee shop yesterday, trying to order on my mobile phone. Yeah, it's true. And unfortunately, that is why, or fortunately, that is one of the reasons why Hong Kong has announced that they're going to change their teaching system in terms of getting more STEM classes out there and empowering young women, young men, empowering them with technology, so that we become a more and more knowledge-based economy. In the beginning, we were this way, and then we sort of faltered for a while, and now we've reset, and this is what we're going to be doing in terms of offering more and more fintech classes. Paul is already, the financial secretary, has already announced this, that this is going to happen.
I mean, 20 years ago, people were like, Hong Kong's cutting edge. Oh, wow. You've got people in the States were like, you've got octopus cards?
Yeah.
You can just swipe and conduct your transaction and just walk out. I mean, I saw this even when I came back in 2006, that you had ATM machines that were, in many aspects, relics of the 70s and 80s when compared to ATM machines in Thailand. You could do so much more with in terms of transactions. But again, the later movers have an advantage. They can adopt the latest technologies and learn from mistakes of others.
And that's why you have a series of virtual banks, the 7 that the original HKMA has approved. Now, are they making money yet? Some are, some aren't. But that digital adoption has been difficult by people of our age group in terms of getting them used to it. But it's slowly making inroads now, and you're seeing it. And when the borders open, I think you're going to see more and more adoption of these areas. But it's also education, and I think that's something that...
But learning by getting involved in it.
Learning by getting involved in it, but also educating through programs. The government can actually do this. We had the CEF fund, where the Continuing Education Fund, where we would pay for, the government would pay for schooling.
Very underutilized.
Very underutilized, and I think that's something, the money is still sitting there. You can still apply for it. And I think this is something that middle-aged people like you and me should actually go back and learn something new. There are schools that are popping up now. A good friend of mine has just opened up an academy to educate college grads or high school grads about customer service, opening accounts for digital asset firms, and getting them plugged into digital asset firms to get hired. So this is hope for kids. Well, we can do the same for adults too. If adults are interested in learning these areas, this can actually be offered. We can offer it through the Vocational Institute. We can offer it through Hong Kong Securities Institute. We need to retool our people. I constantly am learning. You are too. So, I mean, these are things that the government has announced that they want to do, and I think they are good things to be thought about in terms of retooling the next for the next wave.
Yeah, on that point, your point about how technology is going to impact everything, that's been said time and time again, but I'm seeing it in a practical way now that, and believe it or not, I see the people hungriest to learn about technology are the small number of artists that I know that they want to know about NFTs.
Yep.
They want to learn more about how they can use technology to, spread their work and obviously better their financial prospects, earn an income from it, than I am necessarily seeing it from people in professions like we had Ron Yu on the show with his business partner Fred Chan on our second episode, and he was talking about the technophobia within the legal profession. Certainly, if I think about what has impacted the law, other than word processing, spreadsheets, and certain types of databases, legal research, and software to keep track of your billable hours, technology doesn't seem to have impacted the practice of law. That what was good enough for the profession in 1600 seems to be good enough, certainly in the more the system to follow the British system, seems to be good enough for them now that they don't really want to change. And you see that even amongst legal academics, about those that are focused on the future, like Professor Arner, about how technology can be used to serve the law
Exactly.
versus, oh no. I mean, there's certainly professors in this town that are quite allergic to anything technological, that fear it and want to, stay as far away from it as possible, maybe because they fear it. That they may be made redundant somehow because of their lack of knowledge of technology, whereas increasingly you can't really add value if you don't know a little bit about law, technology, or finance in business.
I would agree with that, and it's really touching an area that I'm going to be actually working on a panel with. The insolvency regulator slash organization is actually having a conference in Hong Kong, so it's called Insol, and we were just talking about how many of these insolvency lawyers, accountants are all working on these firms that have been hit by crypto winter. And they're being smacked in the face of, well, how are we going to extract data? Where are we going to find these documents? They've been locked down. How are we going to get into this? And I think this has just thrown it like dead center face plant in terms of how to figure out how to deal with insolvent firms. And that should be like, that's as coalface as you get. And if you're a lawyer that's in insolvency, I don't think you ever would have thought that these firms would have A, gone bankrupt, and then B, now they're stuck with, instead of documents, they have to find the digitized portion of whatever it happens to be, or some record that AJ bought 1 Bitcoin somewhere or lent some Bitcoin. So can you imagine that difficulty? And that's a real life use case right now that these lawyers are coming through with. And I guess I would say you snooze, you lose. If you can't figure this out, many companies are out there that are going bankrupt, then you won't be able to participate in those insolvencies or those litigation works.
That if you're talking about your traditional mainstream pedestrian lawyer or accountant, and I don't say that pejoratively, but there are people who think that which they learned in school, and presumably that which they'll learn through practice, is all they'll need, and that there's no reason to venture beyond that. I mean, I remember one case during the colonial age. An unexploded bomb had been found, and at that time the Hong Kong police force didn't have explosives experts, so they did the next best thing. They sent a ballistics guy.
Yeah.
And so on the job, I think he lost 2 fingers, but on the job, he had to
figure it out. Yeah.
And you see that type of, what people tell me is there's a tendency among students that, oh my God, if they encounter something in real life, we never study this in law school. We didn't cover this. If it isn't a case on all fours that exactly matches your fact pattern, and this is true of the students in the U.S. as well. They freak out. Let's call an expert. Let's call somebody because this is beyond our area of expertise. Whereas if you knew some of the basics, you might at least be able to point the client in the right direction.
Exactly.
Call in the right kind of expert as opposed to, let's call whichever Big Four firm is on our Rolodex that we have good relations with. And as you know, the Big Four may advertise all the same services, but they are not equally good in each of those arenas.
And that's why I think now is the time that connections, that talking to people, by being in meetups, by just networking, that's a part of your whole technology knowledge base. Because I don't know a lot of stuff, but I can pick up the phone and I can say, hey, I need some information about this with the right person.
So and networking is part of your learning?
Very, very much. And it's a skill that you really need to hone down because one person cannot know everything. So I may have this piece, but AJ, you have another piece. So I know that you've just told me this and I will remember that piece of information that you've told me. And then one day I may call you and say, hey, AJ, I've got this issue. and can I get some help with you? So no man or woman is an island. And in technology now, it's all the more important that people work together. And that's why there's these crypto meetups or virtual asset meetups or fintech meetups. That's why there's courses. That's why you go to Token 2049 or FinTech Week to learn the latest, to meet people, to be engaged, to hear the financial secretary talk about his ideas, because that's where you learn. And yes, there are lawyers that can be very happy just doing their conveyancing, and they make a lot of money, and they're doing great. They will stay in that world. But guess what? When e-conveyancing goes up even more, and it's on different blockchains, then they're going to be coming to talk to you and me about, Web3. How do we move that conveyancing?
Again, it's as with law, that there comes a point where knowledge of procedure and moving the case through the court system matters more than substantive law in the area.
That's correct, and that still is the case. And that's why even with this insolvency, they still have to package it so that they can move it through the law, through the courts. That's the interesting part.
So, reasoning by analogy, then the lawyer who's more tech savvy understands the apparatus, the pipes, the system. They know how to keep things going, as opposed to, okay, you may understand conveyancing, but that doesn't matter as much in this day and age as does knowledge of the undergirding framework, the structure.
The person that's going to win in this whole process, using your analogy, is the lawyer, he or she, that will take all of this complicated information, distill it to its most simplest format, and be able to explain it to a judge. And he or she will win the case that way. That's what's going to happen. So forget this, so-and-so didn't pay on their debt and took all their crypto out, or, they absconded with it. Ultimately, they stole. They don't have the money to pay. Judge, I can prove to you this. Forget all the legal mumbo-jumbo of blockchains and things like this. This is what they owe. This is the thing. We've had auditors look at it. Judge, please opine. I mean, ultimately, it's distilling it to that.
This takes me back to my conversation with Jeff Choi Saturday on the flight back home. That if you looked at a lot of the stories about Bitcoin and fraud and theft and malfeasance and hacking in the early days, that really hammered the reputation of crypto, that if you removed Bitcoin from the story and you substituted it with any other asset class, fiat,
Gold blocks.
right, that you'd say, okay, that was just a case of fraud, where the person who was entrusted with the assets absconded. But because it's crypto and because it's new, and people find it dubious because of the association with money laundering. And come back to your point about how AMLO is going to be amended. All too often people, and I was guilty of this because in my early days covering this, I looked at it through the prism of money laundering and terrorist financing. Has that cast too large of a shadow, do you think, on crypto, that people still think about it in terms of, but what about the money laundering issue? What about terrorist financing? People still view it through that prism. Certainly, some of the former Royal Hong Kong Police Force, alumni who are in, compliance and security investigations roles at banks in Hong Kong and Singapore, they're being, many of them are retiring. They're of that age, but. Yes, certainly people in compliance with law enforcement backgrounds, they have no use, they have no truck for crypto. They think it's chicanery. They think the average person doesn't need this level of
Yep.
secrecy because they're coming at it from a copper's perspective. Everyone's guilty until you prove me.
And I have to say, this is the single thing that has hurt this industry. And when I joined it, when I was the global COO for a very large
You had
digital...
some ex-cops at the SFC, didn't you?
Exactly. I was the only female in an entire enforcement division, of which 3 of the senior directors were all police background. And they poo-pooed me when I wrote the internet guidance note. So let's just start with that one. But, and it's not just them, it's people in Hong Kong that still think, oh, what's this Bitcoin? It's not backed by anything. Well, if you think about it, futures and options are really not backed by anything either. They're based off of a price based on a stock, but it's also not backed by anything. So it's a lack of understanding of what digital assets are. And the question I get asked every day is, well, why do you value Bitcoin at this price? And I said, I don't value it. The market values. It's many people that are valuing it at this price because they understand it or because they believe it's going to go up for whatever reason. It's the same thing of why a futures contract is worth X or a corn contract is worth X based on the sky, based on whatever it happens to be that's affecting the price of corn. Well, it's the same thing with digital assets. So I think as time...
People believe that the markets operating are honest and real and true when they value other asset classes. They believe that crypto is somehow dubious because there's opacity and that it's the values are being manipulated. That perception exists.
Correct, and that's why it's now changing. You've got programs like chain analysis, you've got all these different programs that allow people to see where things are going.
Well, by the way.
Exactly.
Going by leaps and bounds.
And leaps and bounds, you're seeing that. You're seeing regulation around the world. And that's why I truly believe, and when I first got my first five Bitcoin for consulting, I just went, okay, I'll take it. Why not? You said it's worth something, and you're very persuasive, so I'll take it. And worst comes to worst, I just put it off to the side. But that was a good decision. It's still sitting somewhere. I don't know where, but it's still sitting there. But basically now, what is happening is you're getting education, and people are starting to understand. And what was considered as a scam, how Bitcoin came out was first, it was used by gamers, it was used by money launderers, it was used by Dark Silk Road, but now you're seeing digital assets thrust into the light, and it will be a real asset. It is a real asset class now. You're seeing funds, you're seeing institutional investors have a proportion of their holdings in it as a hedge, and you're seeing rules and regulations come in place. But it is the cornerstone of CBDC, which is the next phase. CBDC meaning central bank digital currencies. It's the cornerstone and model for other products. And that's where the beauty of all of this that's happening. So what was born in questionality, money laundering, trafficking, has now moved into new technology, new products. It's moving into, I don't need scriptless anymore. I don't need to move from stock to scriptless. I can move it into tokenization. I don't need to have share certificates anymore. I can show it through digital assets because it's immutable. It's there. There's a record there, long after you and I die.
And if you can bypass that intermediate step, that'd be great. The Bank of International Settlements has done a lot to push CBDCs, and they recently concluded a trial run. And now, what do you think about that, prospects of CBDCs?
The question is, will you and I ever have a CBDC wallet? I can't see that right now. I can slowly see.
Infrastructure's not there, or?
Yes, I don't think the education process and the infrastructure is not there. So you've seen some test cases with some of the countries like El Salvador that have adopted Bitcoin as a wallet. So there's a lot of educational process. But you're seeing it now in China where certain cities are tested with CBDC. They get free money and they've been playing with it. But it hasn't had a large-scale adoption as yet. So CBDC will probably be used between, oh, I need to buy I need to buy jets from you, so I'll pay you in CBDC, and you'll pay me for these jets or whatever it happens to be. It'll be country to country first. But how do you get liquid out of it? How does the country get money out of it? It will be very interesting and to see how countries will accept each other's CBDC.
Why are governments, why are nation states getting into this though?
Because it's an easier way to transfer funds that's not necessarily through the banks. And it's a interrelationship between countries. So it's a bilateral relationship. But the question is, what if that relationship becomes acrimonious? Does that mean whoever the country that paid the other country for the jets just goes zzz, and that CBDC disappears in that other, they've delivered the jets. The other country doesn't want to pay and it just goes zzz. So what I foresee is there will be rules of play. There will be rules of engagement being drafted up if they already haven't been. They're testing the technology now. And if you look, even in Hong Kong, it's Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Hong Kong, and China. Yeah. That's the CBDC for Hong Kong. So how is this going to work? Okay, I need to buy oil from Saudi Arabia. I'll pay you in CBDC. You bring the oil over. You get my CBDC. And in return, you use the CBDC to buy something else from me. So that's where it's going to be used for trade.
Closed loop trading system. Mm-hmm. Okay, but the average person's going to say, okay, each month my employer credits my account with my salary, mm-hmm. and that's in Hong Kong dollars, mm-hmm. and that's not paper money, at least not until I withdraw it. Mm-hmm. That's so much of it, most of the time, is in digital form. How is that different from CBDC?
The CBDC, though, eventually may be moved into the retail sense. I just don't see it going right now. So
each CBDC unit will have its own serial number in much the same way regular.
An immutable, yes. So China and Thailand, for example, or Saudi Arabia and Thailand. Thailand is a part of this group. So they're buying oil from Saudi Arabia, and in return, Saudi Arabia is getting palm sugar from Thailand. I can see the payments going this way, back and forth, that Thailand needs stuff from China, so they'll use their Chinese CBDCs that they've received in relation to their sugar cane that they've sold to China. And then China, likewise, will use that same CBDC to pay for stuff again that they're buying for Thailand. I can see that as international trade. But whether or not it gets to yours and my pocket is going to be interesting. There's still a very big necessity for the cash society, but now you and I are already moving to where we transfer funds back and forth, either through our Octopus card or through our bank accounts. We can transfer back and forth using our phone.
Well, what I noticed in Dubai was, again, I remember a time when it was a truly virgin territory where you would never think that by the early 21st century they will be the Manhattan of the Middle East, and that just goes to show things can flip on a dime.
In a dime, and plus, where there's a will, there's a way, and they were not fettered by a lot of vested interests.
Yeah,
legacy institutions. They just had an Emirati that had to be less dependent on oil, so they had to remake themselves.
And
And
an emirate
that's
that
how
didn't
they.
have that much oil
Yep.
is more likely to innovate. You see that with Israel. I mean, if you
Mhm.
don't have that natural resource, that forces you to be innovative. Hence, most of these innovations in the UAE come out of Dubai rather than Abu Dhabi.
Abu
Which have
Dhabi and
more
other
money
places.
because they know that they can do more long-term planning. They know that they'll get a certain amount, not below a certain amount for their oil. So I can see why there's less incentive for that. Um, Something about Hong Kong is, and certainly I think the top-down command structure of the Singapore government's approach to this led to many early successes. Seems to have worked well for them. Hong Kong leaves it to the market, and sometimes that slows things down. But I mean, Paul Chen recently suggested that the government launch pilot schemes
Yep.
on security token offerings for real estate.
Yep.
That be combined with the local industry to promote virtual assets and capital market fundraising. But he also said the government should get more feedback from market players and launch a cross-disciplinary committee to clarify related issues with foreign regulators. So, I mean, there are benefits to cross-border, regulators. I mean, the SEC has had a long-standing positive relationship with the SFC, but this whole notion of let's send it to committee and wait for their report, and then based on their findings, then we'll act. It makes sense. There's a certain logic to it, but I can't help but feel that mindset is what's often slowed things down in Hong Kong and held the city back. Whereas again, Singapore, say what you will about them, when they make their mind up, they work towards that goal and get it done. Whereas Hong Kong may end up there, but eventually, and then it's a matter of how much time passes.
There is good and bad, and you're right with this. When Singapore announced all of their initiatives for virtual assets, we in the virtual assets industry did talk to Hong Kong very much so with the regulators in terms of, guys, we have to get this going quickly. And Singapore did the same thing as they did with hedge funds. They brought down a regime that they grandfathered everybody, and they moved fast, and they brought everybody down there, just like they did 15 years ago with hedge funds. And I'm not criticizing Singapore because I'm very good friends with the regulators there, and I have a lot of time for them. But what has shown is they have been unable to approve any of their licensees. Now, maybe it's a good thing because of the crypto winter, and many of them have gone under. But nevertheless, it doesn't mean that the regulators are not doing their job. They are doing their job there, and I meet with them on a regular basis. But they've attracted a ton of people to move to Singapore and set up shop there, and they've been hugely successful. Hong Kong, we've advised the Hong Kong government so many times about Singapore Inc. and how they do this, and how we, Hong Kong, need to not follow them, but have our own brand and style of a way to attract investors.
As with hedge funds.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've said it over and over again. People invest where they love to be. And that's why Thailand has also missed out. Can you imagine? Every major every major fund manager in Hong Kong probably has a house in Thailand, but they don't open an office there because it's too hard. So Thailand also lost out. But Hong Kong is an advanced financial center. We can keep people here. All we need to do is to have a bit more initiative working with the government. And that's why they're looking at changing the structure. I think Paul, the financial secretary, finally is realizing this and putting this investment committee together, plus also putting their money where their mouth is, the 30 billion to attract new investors in. But also the SFC the HKMA need to work closely with the government in terms of moving faster, a little bit faster at least, to deal with new up-and-coming industries. And I think Web3 is going to be a major change in terms of how fintech is going to be done. I know you look a little bit puzzled when I say that, but I think fintech, Web3.
Well, not being a techie, I'm even when I was attending all these conferences this past month, a lot of it was over my head. The face of things to come, what Web 3.0 will hold. A lot of it sounded rather abstract and grandiose, but more power to them. I mean, if some of those visions can be realized, I guess, and maybe this is a Hong Kong bias, that the first thing that creeps into your mind is, what does this mean for financial services? So, case in point, Metaverse. To the extent that most of us have any inkling as to what this is about, okay, I was a child of the 80s. I was exposed to video games. I've played some VR games. Most of us were exposed to it as VR. But if you think about it, in the 80s and maybe perhaps certainly into the early 90s, other than video games and maybe computer-aided design, what was this technology good for? And with that said, why are financial services interested in it now?
Because it's a new way to reach new customers. And although you and I may not be of this generation of playing with the metaverse, an entire group of people who are your friends' kids have been completely engrossed in iPads and or in this whole gaming.
Yeah, multiplayer games, MMO,
yes.
Yeah.
So it is just an extension for them. And as they come into money, as they inherit their family's money, then the metaverse and all that it stands for actually is just an extension of all those games that they've been playing.
This is nothing new.
No, it's nothing new.
Going into this and having an avatar,
yeah, it's absolutely nothing new. But if you've been playing all of this for all your life, in terms of playing games, you've been an avatar all your life playing these games, which many of my friends' kids, they spend 8 hours a day playing gaming.
So they're ripe for being marketed to.
Yes, and plus, it's not just marketed to, it's part of their lives in terms of, if you spend 8 hours a day, it's more than you and I spend at work sometimes.
Then in a sense, that becomes your
reality. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I think I was most amazed about as I talked to some of my friends' children in terms of, oh, yeah, I know all about this. And I said, well, when you go into the metaverse, what do you see? I see kiddie porn. And I'm like, dude, you're 15. How do you know about kiddie porn? And he just said, that's the metaverse. It's a wild west. And you can see anything and everything. And I was first exposed to this when I entered crypto because I had to read the Reddit channels and I was appalled in terms of it. But that's what these kids are used to. They know better. They've been taught by their parents to not get involved in these things. But it's out there. And they're much more immune to it than you and I are because we don't spend 8 hours gaming.
Innocence is lost without a doubt.
And that's why when you sent me that article about Interpol,
Yeah.
I think it's a very good thing. And I think it's a very good thing that people should be policed because whilst my friend's kid is very savvy, there are less savvy people out there. And I think they do need to be protected. But if you talk to real crypto people or real gamers, they will completely be against this because they believe it's the last place where you can truly be yourself, be it you're wild with no morals, or be it you're a schoolgirl with a school bag, attracting whatever you're attracting. And that's why the metaverse, I think...
But there's a lot of reckless stuff there.
Exactly. It's exciting, but yet it's dangerous, but so was digital assets, and so was financial services. Do you remember when hedge funds came out? They were going to eat our children. Hedge funds were evil. So everything has an evolution, and we are now going probably through one of the biggest revolutions, because we've started in with Satoshi Nakamoto, with the Bitcoin, and now you're seeing thousands of coins, thousands of new products. Then the next phase is Web3, and then it'll be Web whatever. It's just constant evolution. And that's what you're going to be seeing. And you're going to be seeing financial markets embrace digital assets. You're seeing Bank of New York, State Street, they've already announced it. Goldman has a 30-person desk in Hong Kong already for digital assets. And on the other side, you've got FTX, Binance, who are the crypto natives, who are now hiring heads of compliance, who are now hiring and getting licenses in Vara, and so on and so forth. So you're seeing this convergence coming together. And
what will be the role of lawyers in this particular financial lawyers, and because we're with HKU, of legal academia? What role will they play?
advisor, structurer, cleaner, explainer to the judges, helper in terms of drafting the right rules and regulations, helping SFC, helping the exchanges that we'll be setting up, including Hong Kong exchanges, who has a want to get into the digital asset industry. So lawyers have, as they always have, a front row seat in terms of being a part of this whole change, because ultimately we need good lawyers, advisors to actually get the legislation right. And law draftsmen will be very necessary. So maybe you don't have the huge volumes, but you still have the same thing that you have to type in and actually have the laws, either in paper format or in digital format. And there'll be the insolvency lawyers that have to clean up the mess after things have gone wrong, which they're doing right now. So I can only see that the legal industry will only grow. I'm seeing young people really focus, because I just graduated from my master's program. Thanks. But many of the JD students are moving into the big law firms. They're going into big law, but they're working on digital asset projects. They're working on raising funds for financial services companies. They're raising funds for digital asset companies. So they're already being thrown in it. And so for lawyers, I think that's why I pivoted from accounting into legal with compliance and so on and so forth. And I think it has one of the brightest futures. And for those of you who get tired of working 80 hours a day, you can become a judge. How many more cases are we going to get in bankruptcy court? If you don't have an understanding of digital assets, well, how are you going to deal with that? I just found out that my cousin, his name is Robert Kwan, he was the first Chinese presiding judge in the bankruptcy court I think America, but he was the first Asian minority to be allowed to be a judge. And 30 years later, in, Los Angeles.
Okay,
yeah. And now, as they honored him in this room, there were Mexican, Indian, Chinese, Caucasian judges now that are now a part of the bankruptcy court. So he was a real pioneer. And it's the same for whoever's going into digital assets to deal with bankruptcies, because firms are going to go bankrupt. So for those of you who are listening to this podcast, I think law is a very, very great area of study, which is why I pivoted to it. And
increasingly, I'm seeing more law firms with compliance and investigation practices.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? Well, you would think that typically this is the sort of thing they would outsource to a big four firm or Kroll or Hill and Associates or Navigant, Protiviti. The list goes on. What or FTI? Why are they doing that?
There are still things that law
do
firms
they want to cut in? Do
they want
their
to
cut of
they're
that
cutting.
as well?
They want that cut, and lawyers now are being asked more and more to help in terms of processes. So, in a recent case that I worked on, I worked directly with the lawyers, and they had to go. They used accounting firms, but their lawyers also had to look after the accounting firms in terms of making sure that the information was presented properly. So it's that law firm that got the accounting firm in, reviewed all the materials, and made sure that it was presented properly. So more and more you're seeing law firms move into this area. And of course, you have the ethics rules where law firms can only do so much. Now that's the Ethical American Bar Association. It's the same in Hong Kong. So, but you're seeing firms that are doing novel things. Of course, they have to put an arm's length. DLA had a tokenization platform that the partners invested into. Was not a part of the law firm. And that's where Jeff, for example, works now, and Scott Theo runs that. So it's been novel, and now you're seeing more lawyers moving into that space. But it may not be that law firm. It may be the partners being forward-thinking, or it could be that they're tie-ups with other firms. So yeah, it's to get a cut of the business also.
Accountants are practicing law. People say they're not. But, I mean, what they put out, I've said to someone in the Big Four, how does what you do differ from what a law firm does? And they're like, well, we're not offering a legal opinion.
But they have real hands-on working experience with tax. Yeah. They have real hands-on working experience with audits, and they see all the internal controls failures. That is one area where lawyers can see it in terms of the law, but unless you actually work in it every day, and I think this is, for example, one of the skills that I have. When I look at an organization, I can see it in 2 seconds. Where are the weak points and where I need to focus on in terms of security or procedures or making sure that you have policies and procedures in place. That's something that an auditor can see immediately, because I was an internal auditor and an auditor, and we just go through and fix these companies. That's what we do. Whereas a lawyer advises. They don't actually fix it.
Are these opportunities going to be confined only to the lawyers with STEM backgrounds, science or engineering or technology backgrounds? Or, can the rest of us, us mundanes, us liberal arts majors, join the party as well? Because increasingly what I'm finding is a lot of the people in fintech aren't techies, but they're doing they're in operations or, enterprise management or what have you, or in sales. A lot of the people in fintech and crypto are not techies, but
no, they're not. And
they learned about the subject.
They learned about the subject, and one of the founders that I worked with of a giant exchange, he came from a computer science background, so he had computer companies before, but he discovered Bitcoin, and that was how I got my first advisory project with them. Is they wanted to set up an exchange, so they figured it out. And although they had a computer science background, one was a computer scientist, the other was a doctor, a medical doctor, and the two of them have now built one of the most successful exchanges in the world. So where there's a will, there's a way in terms of learning by experience, and they went through hell. They got hacked, but they came back with a vengeance in terms of being financially strong and getting over it. But I think even for all the lawyers or accountants that get into this industry, they may not have been classically trained. And I have to say, probably you and I both, I came from an audit background. And although I did what we called 2010, the language of KPMG, I had to do the programming of that. I'm not by any means a huge tech person, but I've had to learn out of interest about how do NFTs work, how do you mint them, what is digital assets, how does the blockchain work? Because if I'm going to be able to be useful to investing, public teaching, I have to be able to understand it and make it and break it down as simplistic as possible so I can teach other people. So if I can do it, other people can do it. It's just, do you have the patience to do this and learn about this? So I think for classically trained compliance officers, if they're willing to make the jump, which now, in 2018, I couldn't hire a single compliance person. And now compliance officers are asking to be hired by digital asset firms. So it's very exciting for me to see this. And
well, they see the direction things are going in.
Exactly. So this is such a shift already. And I think as long as you're willing to learn and do the right thing, and keep your ethics and keep what you know in terms of internal controls, and then add that dimension of fintech into it, be it Web3 or be it security protocols or proper internal controls for the custody of digital assets. All of that will make a lawyer or an accountant a much better employee to join this industry and to help make digital assets a real industry.
But how deep do you go? I mean, Ron, you would say to me, they don't necessarily have to be coders. They don't necessarily have to learn computer programming, but they have to be tech savvy enough.
One of my friends who took pity on me and tutored me for some of my classes because I had been out of school for so long, and she taught me. She's gone into big law. She's doing fabulously, but she's like, what's the next step for my life? And she says, I would like to relocate back to my home, and what's the area that I should be going into? And I advised her, you should be going into tech. You've been given parents that have given you a very good brain. You've done great in every case that they've thrown at you in big law, from raising funds to doing documents to doing this and that. You have an ability to learn, and that ability to learn and learn quickly is your skill that you have honed from your school. So she felt a lot better in terms of at least she has the next path, and it's just pointing them the right way. And hopefully all of these law schools, including Hong Kong U, which is the Harvard of the East, and equips young men and women to be able to learn quickly, to be able to synthesize information, to be able to articulate it, and work on new and interesting projects and be of help. And I think this is, if anything a law school can do, it can teach you to think. And for that year of my master's program, I was taught to think in new ways, meet new professors, think of new ideas. But it took the knowledge that I had before and just repackaged it and allowed me to learn in different ways. So I think...
Because with your experience, I mean, Harvard's prestigious for sure, but and I'm sure you learned a great deal while you were there with those types of professors, but with your experience, I would imagine you could almost be teaching your fellow students.
But I learned from them. I learned from that young lady who taught me how to study. I learned from her in terms of what I should be looking for. And it's something that we all have our expertise. We play tennis, we do the same swing. But when you have somebody else give you, hey, maybe you should think about this, it gives you another viewpoint. And I think that's what people need to be open to. And I think for me, Harvard opened me up to meeting new professors, thinking about new areas. I didn't even know that CIA tortured people during this crisis, and we had to study the torture papers, and I was appalled that that could even happen.
Was that did you study national security law?
No, it was one of my classes, the challenges of a
electives.
general counsel, and we met the guy who tore it all down to stop this whole process, to allow FBI agents and CIA agents to torture people. He took it, luckily, he whistle blew and put it all together. He's now a professor at Harvard. And he stopped the torture papers. But it basically, the lawyer that wrote the legal advice went down to the point of, well, if you like take an electrical thing and like do this to a body part, that's okay.
To a child in front of their parents.
Yes.
And I just went. The United States could authorize that. Yep. And John, you still at Berkeley?
Mm-hmm. But that, I mean, I didn't know that. And I mean, the law can be used in so many different ways. And that's what I learned out of that. And these examples, you never get them anywhere else. That, well, at least I didn't think so. And I really learned a lot from this. And yeah, maybe I could teach some classes. But now I can teach even more because I've learned this.
Is there anything you'd like to impress upon our viewers and listeners, particularly the students, given the world they're going to be entering pretty soon?
Just be open to all sorts of opportunities and don't poo-poo anything. At least look into it. And just trust your intellect and trust your education process. There are a lot of scams out there, and you've seen them, but there's also a lot of interesting things. And honestly, Hong Kong has had such a bad rap, and I'm one of those people that really believes in Hong Kong. So I would hope that we give Hong Kong a chance. And it's so easy to criticize, but it's so difficult to try to help and try to make this place a better place. So I truly believe that we need to help management, meaning the government, as well as our fellow regulators, as well as the financial services industry, to make digital assets and fintech a real area. When I first came here, it was the most exciting place. It still is exciting to me every day. And I think the opportunities that I've gotten here far outweigh what I would have gotten anywhere else.
Oh, totally, yeah. Totally.
And I think this is something that I think we need to help Hong Kong at this time. And I think we can go back to being better than everywhere else as we used to be.
Well, Angelina Kwan, thank you so much for joining.
And AJ, thank you very much for being the moderator, and thank you, Pross.